Welcome to the Cinema 4D Nodes course. Today we are going to be covering the Extrude node. We learned one node a day while applying it to our project of 3D modeling a countertop for a kitchen. And you don't need to be a 3D hotshot to learn how to do this. You just need a coach that will teach you how to block and punch before throwing you in the ring and saying good luck. So 3D modeling is very similar to that. We're working our way up to more and more complexity, one node at a time, so that it's easier instead of a shock to your mind and your system. Today we are covering the Extrude node, which is super helpful. And this is our end product of what we are working on 3D modeling, one node at a time. You can see that we've actually gotten pretty far so far in this class, because we are on to the extrude here, which are these two here. So we're over halfway there, I feel, to being done. I'm going to switch back to where we left off in this project. Now we're going to need to extrude the base here, this section here, and we're also going to need to extrude the countertop, the top part here. So we'll talk a little bit about how we're going to do that. And again, we separated these two sections using the split. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, if you haven't already, make sure that you're in your nodes layout. And if you'd like to see your points or polygon indexes, make sure you have this turned on so that when you click on your model, you can see them here in the viewport. And those are just to identify what you're working on and selecting. I'm going to open up the asset browser, and here you'll see under our geo modifiers, one of the things we have selected. Here you can find your extrude, and you can use this as a node as we've done here, but you can also use it as a capsule. So in the capsules, you can just drag and drop it in here. And what this will do is it'll extrude if we add a cube to our scene, for example. If we put it within the hierarchy of the cube, it will in fact extrude it. So that's how capsules work. But today we're focusing on the node, so we're going to take a look at that as an option. And I'm just going to drag and drop another node in here, because once again, we're not only extruding the bottom section, but also the top part of the countertop. And we'll get to that point in just a moment. Now I'll go ahead and close the asset browser. We are going to go through all the settings here for the extrude so that regardless of what project you're working on, you know how to do what you need to do for it. Whether if you're 3D modeling a countertop or not, I want you to be able to apply these skills to anything. So here, let's focus on the bottom first and go ahead and work through the extrude settings from the top to the bottom here. Now, our first option is type. We can choose what we're extruding. We can extrude points, we can extrude edges, and we can extrude polygons. And these have different options available to them. So if we scroll down, you'll see we have different options for the polygons as well as the edges. And you can drop these down by clicking on these arrows here. So we're going to get into that a little bit more in depth. For right now, we're just going to talk about the polygons, and you'll see we can choose our selection string. Since we have default selected, we are using our selection we chose in the previous episode from our selection node. The default is whatever is active prior to this node. So that is our selection string right now. You can, of course, manually enter in anything that you'd like and enter in what to affect in a selection string would mean using these numbers that are identifying our polygons in order to do so. So it's helpful to be able to view these in our viewport of what's what. Now you'll notice right now that our example has these extruding inwards, and right now this one's extruding outwards. So how do we affect that? Well, here in your offset, you can choose a negative number or a positive number. Right now we have 20. If we choose something like negative 2.5, you'll see that does extrude in the opposite direction. So negative and positive numbers are your friends here and making things go the way you wish for them to go. Now let's say we increase this offset even more. That'll help us see other options here, like offset variation. We won't need this for this instance, but I want you to know how this works because I think you'll find it really helpful, especially if you're making something that's like agreeable kind of textured model or something like that, or something that feels a little bit more randomized. Now, if you increase this offset variation here, you'll see that it is varying how much each one of those polygons in our selection string is being extruded. Now, this is determined based on your offset, so these two work side by side. It varies these by a percentage based off of your offset amount in here. So you'll want to keep that in mind while you're working on these. You'll notice that the inset and inset variation options are grayed out. Now, why that's happening is that this really applies more to points. So we'll go through some of the settings for points in a moment. The next cool option here we have is subdivision. I think this will be easier to see if we just decrease this offset variation to 0. And let's just set something generic for our offset like 100. Okay, so we have subdivisions. Now, if we just start increasing this, it'll subdivide this by adding in loops. I'll turn off my polygon indexes here just so they can see this a little bit more easily. When we increase subdivisions, it's adding in more edge loops to subdivide this form along the section that is being extruded. If you choose per step, that's going to subdivide it in a different way. So this per step is affecting your subdivision. Let's turn on the per step and now subdivide it. You'll notice that each time it subdivides it, it also extrudes it out by 100 centimeters by whatever you have chosen in your offset. So let's click this again and you'll see the effect that's having. And of course, you can adjust your offset still from here. So we could make this 50, and you'll see that for each subdivision, it is now extruding at 50. But you're still getting those edge loops in there. Now, this create n-gons will be easier for you to see if you turn on your polygon indexes again and point indexes. We have everything selected. I may actually, just to make it easier for you to see, turn off the polygon indexes, because I think that this you'll see better if we just point out the points. Point out the points for right now. Okay, so you can see that these are our points and we are subdividing. Now we can still choose to subdivide, but instead of making these edge loops here, while we're subdividing, we can choose to just make it one big n-gon. Now, an n-gon is a polygon with more than 4 sides. So you can see that these polygons right now, they have 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 sides for each one. Now, if we turn on create n-gons, you can see that the points are still here, as though we're subdividing it, because we are still subdividing this, but you aren't seeing those edge loops. It's just adding in the points to subdivide it. And it's creating n-gons. So now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, a bunch of edges on this polygon. It has more than 4 edges, so now it's an n-gon. I'm going to turn that off for right now. These other options here are useful for curved surfaces. So if you're 3D modeling something curved, this is going to be really important to you in order to understand what use islands are, max angle. So actually, if we look inside of here, you'll notice that these are open. If you choose create caps, it'll close it off, it'll cap it. So that's what the create caps are. Now this use islands, that applies to curved surfaces. So let's go ahead and grab our GeoMesh folder here in our asset browser. We're going to go into our GeoMesh, And then we are going to select a cylinder as an example, so that we get to learn how to extrude also with curved surfaces, how to work within that. So here's our cylinder. We dragged and dropped that node in there. And now let's go ahead and add a extrude. Here's our extrude node. We will extrude our cylinder here. I'm going to turn off the indexes for right now so you can see this more clearly on the viewport. And you can see that right now we are extruding everything as individual polygons. Well, what if you want to extrude a section or an area that is curved all together as a group? Well, this isn't going to work. So what do? We turn on Use Islands, and it will recognize that curved surface there as an entire island to extrude. So we're saying use the islands to extrude this. Now, as we all know, curved surfaces, they curve at varying amounts. Some have more pronounced curves, some have more shallow curves. So how do you tell Cinema 4D what curves we're recognizing as islands? Well, you use this max angle option down here. Max angle. Right now we have 89 degrees. If I reduce this to 0, it's no longer recognizing this curve as an island we want to extrude as a group. So what is this max angle? Well, right now we are looking at the angle between the polygons, and however much that angle is, at what point it is recognized as the curved surface we want to extrude as an island, or not recognized as a curved surface we'd like to extrude as an island, we need to choose a tolerance for at what point that angle is, it's recognized. So at 0, we have no tolerance to recognize this as an island. It is just being extruded as all individuals. Now, as we increase this, we're increasing our tolerance. So we're giving this more wiggle room, and eventually, once we reach the number of degrees that are between the angles of these polygons' normals, once we reach that point, all of a sudden it recognizes it as a curved surface. So if you are 3D modeling with curves, really important thing to know is how to extrude those all together as a group. So let's talk about our edges and our points. So in order to do this as an example, let's take our cylinder over here and let's say, you know what? We are just going to extrude the edges, and click on that. Now you can see we are extruding the edges, and this is a pretty interesting form to create from that. Now you can of course determine your offset as usual. How much do you want to extrude these edges and such? But there's additional options down here under edges. You can choose the angle of rotation in which you are extruding your edges. So let's increase this here and decrease it. You can see that we are changing the angle of the extrusion, and that's a very interesting effect. It's fun to play around with these settings. Now let's talk points. I like using the cube as an example for points. So let's open up our asset browser here and go over to our geomeshes and find our cube. Cubes are just the most classic shape to 3D model, I feel. Now we're going to connect the geometry to the geometry for our cube and our extrude. Let's change this from edges to points. Okie dokie. And now that we have that, let's talk about Inset. So I find this really fun to do. Let's adjust the Inset. Just show it at 3 for right now. You can see that we have pointy points. We are extruding our points. And this Inset is determining that base for that point extrusion. I'm closing the asset browser here for a moment. Now the screen's nice and big. And let's increase our Inset. So you can see that is increasing the base of this extrusion of the points. We have a nice pointy cube here. Now, what if we wanted to randomize that? Well, we can do that. We can do that with the Inset variation down here. So right now it's 0. So, you know, everything's uniform, extruding nice and uniform. If that's your thing, that's great. If that's not your thing and you want some randomness added in here, let's increase this Inset variation. So let's do it now. You can see the more that I increase this, the more this is randomized. And now it's adding a randomized percentage of whatever our number is entered in here, 23. All of these are randomized at different percentages of that, using that as the max. So you can see that as we increase our Inset, we're adjusting our max, that this can be Inset. And then the Inset variation is randomizing these by varying degrees on each point. And of course, the more you increase this, the more random it becomes. So that's a super fun tool. I find it super fun. So let's continue on this 3D modeling adventure. You are a boss at the Extrude, so let's apply this. Let's apply this to our countertop. We know all of these settings. We know them. We're an expert. You're an expert. And let's go ahead and drag our extrude from our original model up in here. And let's make this look like a very nice countertop. So what do we need in order to achieve this look here in our final, or something similar to it? You can do whatever you want. It doesn't have to look like that. Let's adjust the offset to -2.5. 2.5, there we go. And now, do we want to use subdivisions? Probably not. It's not necessary. Let's keep things nice and neat and low poly. Now, we want to extrude this top part. So you'll notice that we have the split here. We split this in 2. So that's the base. And then the top, if we connect this to our geometry, hopefully it does it this time. If we connect this, you'll see that is the top of our countertop. Now, it would be nice to add some interesting definition to that, right? So what we'll need to do is connect this to the extrude, and then we need to connect this here. And we want to extrude this. So how thick do you want your countertop to be? This is where you get to make that decision, and you choose it with your offset. So there we go. And you'll notice that you may want to extrude this out even further. Maybe you want it to go this way. You can extrude out this countertop any direction you'd want. And here I think that's a really nice detail. And by the way, if you want this to be closed on the bottom, you can turn on create caps. Now that's entirely optional. You don't have to do that for your model. But in this case, we can keep those. I'm going to keep this open, but if you wanted to animate the countertop separately, you might want to close that for both the base and the top so that you can animate them separately and have them appear closed. That's just something to keep in mind. A use example of where you would use that in the real world is if you want to animate the parts of your model separately. Now in our case, I'm not planning on animating this. I am making this so that when I 3D model homes prior to construction for clients that they can visualize what it would look like if they had a countertop in their kitchen. And it gives you a nice sense of scale when you add in things into your spaces to make them look real. That's the use case scenario here. So what we're going to need is, I actually want to extrude this side and this side. So we need to figure out what that is. Let's turn on our polygon indexes. You can see that's 2 and 4. So we want to extrude 2 and 4. We'll need to add that to our selection string, but let's first add a select node, which you know because we have covered that previously in this series. So let's grab our select, drop it on in here, and we're going to want to extrude our select. So let's go into our geo modifiers and grab our extrude. Oh, another fun thing you might want to be aware of is that if you click on a node, you can do this way instead of dragging and dropping the extrude. You can hold Control, click, and drag, and now we've got 2 extrudes. So now we can just connect the extrude to the select, select connects to the extrude, extrude connects to the geometry. And now that we have that handy dandy, we talked about our selection string. What are we extruding? We are extruding, I think it was 2 and 4. I already forgot what we're extruding. Oh, no, I didn't. I did that correctly. I thought that I forgot, but no, I remembered right. Okay. So now you can see that we have 2 and 4 extruding. Now, what do you want that overhang to be for your countertop? That's what you're deciding here when you choose the offset amount. So you can choose 2, you can choose 3. Totally optional to have that nice area there. Now, at some point later on, we are going to connect these 2 sections so that they all become one model you can visualize at once. We aren't quite to that point yet. I find it helpful to separate these so that we 3D model in sections. So if you'd like to stay tuned to know how to texture parts of your 3D model using nodes inside of Cinema 4D and get it looking just the way you'd like, go ahead and click this button up here so that you learn about the Store Selection node, which is super helpful for that among many other use cases. See you soon.